Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. Please take your seats and silence all cell phones. Thank you.
Our next piece is Freedom Finale. Thank you so much. The Symphony Orchestra will now be playing Radetzky's March. I'd like to take this time very quickly to say thank you so much for the Reagan Library inviting Santa Susana High School to participate in this amazing event. This is our second year doing it, and we are very, very honored to be here. The Symphony Orchestra's last piece for our pre-program music is Warrior Legacy.
Well, first, let's begin by giving another round of applause to the San Jose High School Symphony Orchestra. We also want to say thank you to the Tiger Squadron who did that terrific flyover this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to see them. They waited until Jake pulled into the driveway. It's a wonderful scene. Well, good morning. For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is John Highbush, and I have the honor of being Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Thank you all so much for coming this morning. I'd now like to introduce the President Ronald Reagan Marine Corps League Detachment number 597, who will parade the colors. I ask that you please stand for the colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. Parade the colors.
Our time. Arch. Back. Oh, forward, left. Color guard. Hold. Out. Hoots. Ready. Come. Ready. 2. Hey. Yep. Come.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
retire the colors.
Order. Come. Ready. 2. Out. Hit. Oh, word. Out. Oh, forward. Left. Oh, forward. Left.
Thank you. Please be seated. Before we go further, there's a few people in the audience I'd like to recognize. A special thank you to Mrs. Bevan, Abby, and Dr. Catherine Kuby for providing today's world-class musical performances. And to Paul DiNobilo and the Washington Artillery of New Orleans for their wonderful reenactments in the courtyard. And of course, a very special thank you to all the veterans in our audience today. We thank you for your honor, your bravery, and for your dedication to our country and its freedom. We salute all of you. In 1986, speaking about Veterans Day, President Reagan said the following, quote, "Veterans Day is the day America sets aside to honor millions of our finest heroes. They are the men and women who defend our country and preserve our peace and our freedom. If we remember that their dedicated service is in defense of our freedom, and if we understand that they put their lives on the line so we might enjoy justice and liberty, then their sacrifices will not be in vain. This is our obligation, and this has been the spirit of Veterans Day from the very beginning." President Reagan concluded by saying, "Each time our nation has called upon our citizens to serve, the best have come forward. Words cannot express our gratitude and admiration. But we can, and we should, take the opportunity on this Veterans Day to remember their gift to us. When you see one of our young men and women in uniform on the street, how about a smiling hello, and maybe even a thank you? Veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they've suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. That is our duty." So in honor of these men and women, those who are currently fighting, those who are missing, those who have perished, and those who are veterans, may I please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now to today's program. Our first speaker today, in President Reagan's words, is a veteran who suffered the scars of freedom and who understands the price of freedom. He gave his best for America, serving our country with honor and distinction in the Vietnam War, where he was awarded the Bronze Star he received during his tour of duty. As he will share with you shortly, the Army accidentally sent him an extra Bronze Star. What he did with it, I will leave it to Tom to tell. By the way, for those of you in the audience who will tour the Reagan Library later today, please make sure you stop into our Heroes Gallery, where you will get a chance to find Tom's star on display there. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, a true American hero, Mr. Tom Riley.
Oh. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Thank you, and good morning. There we go. My name's Tom Riley, and I'm here with you today with my old buddy from the infantry, John Valle, and John's wife, Sylvia, and my wife, Margie. And the four of us are very conscious of the fact that we're here with you today representing more than the 2.5 million people who fought in the Vietnam War. During my time in that war, I was awarded the Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Combat Infantryman's Badge. Came home, walked into our family's house, looked on our family's TV set, and saw men walking on the moon for the very first time. It was July 20th, 1969. After that, I tried to do what every veteran tries to do, make a successful transition back into civilian life. Got a job, got married, met my wife at work. That worked really well. And bought a house. And everything was looking pretty good. And then something really, really strange happened. Now, we all know that the United States Army never, ever makes a mistake. But, I know, but for some reason, the United States Army sent me another Bronze Star. It came at the house, and the display case had the Bronze Star and the little lapel pin that goes with it. And I was very puzzled about it. And there might have been a temptation for a while to make up an extra story to go with the extra Bronze Star and something really heroic, type up an extra citation, etc. But finally, hopefully, I did the right thing. Nothing. Sometimes nothing's the best thing you can do. I just took the case, still puzzled about the whole thing, and put it in the top dresser drawer in our bedroom. And that's where it stayed, from right around 1971 to exactly 1981. March 30th, 1981 stunned the world with the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. 4 good men were shot. 4 good men conducted themselves heroically in a situation that would have undone most other men. I think America is always going to remember the story about President Reagan being wheeled into the operating room, meeting the surgeons who were going to try and save his life, and joking with them. He literally said to them, "I sure hope you all are Republicans." Well, it's a really good time to ask that question, but Republicans are not. They got him through the crisis safely, and as we all know, Ronald Reagan went on to serve 2 terms as President of the United States. Now, back in that time, of course, everybody was reading newspaper articles and magazine articles and watching TV programs about the assassination attempt. I'm pretty sure, after all this time, that it was a newspaper article, and it was about a corporal in the Marine Corps who also was a Vietnam veteran, who also received a Purple Heart, and the corporal's name was Ismael Franco. Corporal Franco dedicated his Purple Heart to President Reagan. I was very touched at the story reading it, and then I remembered that Bronze Star still sitting in its place case and still sitting in that dresser drawer, and decided to dedicate my Bronze Star to President Reagan as well. So packed everything up. I wrote a letter to the president, which read in part, if my fading memory is right, please accept this Bronze Star in appreciation of your courage and as a hope for your continued recovery and success as president. I only wish I had 3 more to give to each of the men that were wounded with you. Sincerely yours, etc. Sent everything off to the White House in Washington, D.C. It was mid-April 1981. And, well, never heard another word for 31 years. I know. Melissa and Patty and, let me think, Carrie all started contacting me. It must have been about spring, I think, Melissa, wherever you are, of 2012. Wanted to know if I was the Tom Riley who sent the Bronze Star to President Reagan in 1981. Yeah, it was me, all right. This was 2012, this was 1981, and I was getting ready to sue the U.S. Post Office for everything it was worth. But apparently it wasn't the Post Office's fault. You remember the ending in Raiders of the Lost Ark? When the Ark is taken in this great big crate and it goes in this huge cavernous warehouse with all these other crates and all these long corridors. I think my Bronze Star was right on top of that crate when they finally put it in there. Or maybe what happened was that there was some kind of, it apparently got in the archives and fell through the cracks somewhere. And an audit brought it out to light in that very, very late date. The good news was that somebody had taken down my name, address, and phone number. The other news, bless you, was that he took down my name and address and phone number just before he lost my letter. Luckily, I had a copy at the house, so we were able to send that on. And it means a great deal to John and Sylvia and Margie and Tom to know that that Bronze Star, that lapel pin, the display case, and that letter are all now a permanent part of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Vietnam veteran. Those two words have had an awful lot of interpretation in the more than 2 generations since the Vietnam War was fought. Us Vietnam veterans are a unique bunch in American history. For far, far too many years, we listened, and we listened in vain to hear 2 words from you, the American people. The words thank and you. Nearly 60,000 of us died during the Vietnam War itself. Due to the absence of those 2 words, just 2 words, nearly 3 times that number of us killed ourselves after the war was over, in all the ways that you can do that. Suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, exposure. A lot of us were homeless after the war. And now, in a new century, with Agent Orange beginning to make itself more and more known among us, including myself. And I guess we can call it an advanced experience level or old age, whatever fits better, but none of us are exactly 21 anymore. And in this new century, with over 2/3 of us gone already, and with an average life expectancy of less than 66 years, it seems very, very likely that well within the next 10 years, all of us will be gone. Not just part of America's past, but part of America's history. Please know, and if you don't remember another thing about this speech, please remember that every time one of you says thank you to one of us, you are telling one of the Vietnam veterans still left among us that the American people have finally decided to give us the same recognition, the same honor, the same appreciation that every single human being who takes the time out of their lives to put on this country's uniform and serve in this country's military should always receive, no matter what the conflict, no matter what the outcome of that conflict. Thank you very much. Can I ask a favor of the audience, since we're all getting along so well at this point? Would all of the Vietnam veterans with us, just the Vietnam veterans for now, would you stand up, John, so that we can thank you for your service to your country? There's got to be more than 2 of us, and there are. Here we go. Yes. Very good. Now, you know we're not done with that yet, because we're all part of the same process. We're all part of the same tradition, and we all deserve the same thanks. Would all of the veterans of all of the conflicts who are here with us today, would you stand up so we can thank you for your service to your country? World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan. Yes. Good. Thank you so much for that. You know, those 2 words are the only 2 words any soldier ever wants to hear. Thank you. No more, no less. You know, we all have a past, we all have a present, and we all have a future. We all deserve a past, a present, and a future. Because we all need to tell our stories, we all need to live our lives. We all need to make our plans for whatever our futures might hold. We're very, very grateful, the 4 of us, for the staff here at Simi Valley, having us come out and be part of this very special ceremony with you today. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. Thank you very much for letting this particular old soldier tell you this particular story on this very special Veterans Day 2013. Thank you again, and God bless America. Thanks, John. Thank you. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you, Tom, very, very much. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker. And I know that many of you know him from the lead with Jake Tapper on CNN, or certainly from his many years at ABC News, where he covered a wide range of stories, visiting remote corners of Afghanistan, covering the war in Iraq, spending time in New Orleans to cover the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and as the lead political reporter for the coverage of the 2008 presidential election. Jake is also an accomplished author. His most recent book, The Outpost, An Untold Story of American Valor, is the heartbreaking and inspiring story of one of America's deadliest battles during the war in Afghanistan. The book debuted in the top 10 on the New York Times bestseller list. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jake Tapper.
Thanks, John. Thank you, John and Melissa and Tom. If I can be presumptuous enough to speak on behalf of everybody here, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm kind of an odd pick to speak on Veterans Day because I have not served. My claim is that I had an awakening about those who do. And that awakening came when I researched and wrote the book, The Outpost. Reagan said in 1988 on Veterans Day, "We're gathered today just as we have gathered before to remember those who have served, those who fought, those still missing, and those who gave their last full measure of devotion for our country." He was at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial that day, and he noted that for too long a time, Vietnam veterans stood in a chill wind as if on a winter's night watch. And in that night, their deeds spoke to us, but we knew them not, and their voices called to us, but we heard them not. I do wonder how we will come to think of our current soldiers, our current service members serving in Afghanistan, and those who have recently come back from Iraq. They do not stand in a chill wind. They do not experience what Vietnam veterans experienced. But sometimes I think about our veterans, and I recall what Elie Wiesel once said, that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And I wonder if we are treating our veterans with the warmth they deserve. They are not in a chill wind, but do they feel our appreciation? Do they know that we care? My son, Jack, was born on October 2nd, 2009. The next day, in an obscure valley, in an obscure corner, in an unknown province of Afghanistan, a place called Combat Outpost Keating, 53 U.S. troops were attacked by up to 400 Taliban insurgents. And as I held my son, Jack, in my arms, and watched this story unfold on the news in little snippets over the next few days, and I heard about the valor of these men and the indefensible place, the indefensible location they had been put in. The Combat Outpost Keating was at the bottom of 3 very steep mountains. So when the 53 U.S. troops woke up that day, not only were they surrounded by up to 400 Taliban, they all had the high ground. And as I held my son Jack and I heard about 8 American sons taken from this world, I wanted to know more. If on October 1st somebody had told me that I was going to write a 600-page book about Afghanistan, I would have had no idea what they were talking about. But there was something about that moment, something about hearing about these men and wanting to know more, and then not finding out more just as a news consumer, not hearing an explanation from the media or from the Army as to why these men had been put in this position. The Army did their investigation a few months later with efficiency. It was an investigation that was limited to the few months before the attack and what happened that day. And officers were reprimanded. But there was still no answer as to why were these men put at the bottom of three steep mountains just 14 miles from the Pakistan border where all the bad guys were. And it began to gnaw on me. I was the senior White House correspondent for ABC News at the time, and I had done some war coverage. I'd spent a few weeks in the Baghdad Bureau, and I'd covered the war from the comfort of the north lawn of the White House. I'd covered the war when they were debating inside that big white building how many troops to send. Would it be 5,000? Would it be 10,000? Would it be 40,000? Numbers bandied about like how much a movie cost or a sports score. And I covered the politics of Afghanistan. I covered President Obama and his AFPAC review, Afghanistan-Pakistan review, trying to figure out what to do. And Joe Biden wanted to do this, and General McChrystal wanted to do that. But nowhere in my coverage was there any understanding of the 8 men who died at the bottom of that mountain that day. Eventually, I just started calling some of the men who had served there once they got back, which wasn't until the next spring, because even if you go through a horrific experience, as Tom knows well, that doesn't mean you get to go home early. You still have a full year of deployment left, or a full year of deployment to finish. So they weren't back until May. So I started calling around and eventually talking to enough troops who were really eager to share their story. Yes, suspicious of the fancy pants reporter from Washington, D.C., but they wanted people to know who Justin Gallegos was, and Michael Scusa, and Stephen Mace. They wanted their stories told. Eventually, I signed a book deal to write about what happened at Combat Outpost Keating, and I figured it would just pretty much be limited to the last few months of the outpost. But then a remarkable thing happened. Soldiers who had served at Combat Outpost Keating in previous years, it had been formed in the summer of 2006, they started reaching out to me, they started tracking me down, and they wanted me to tell their stories too, and the stories of their friends and their fallen comrades. The first one to reach out to me was a young intelligence officer named Ross Burkoff, who was with 371 Cav, they'd set up the outpost, and he wanted to explain to me why they set the outpost up in that spot, what they were thinking. And he wanted, I think, more importantly, for me to tell the story of his commander, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Fenty, who was killed in a horrific helicopter crash in 2006, in which 10 American soldiers were killed that got almost no media coverage. Think about that. 10 American soldiers. They didn't die, by the way, because of the enemy. They died because of the terrain. The land in Afghanistan, especially in that part of Afghanistan at the foot of the Hindu Kush mountain range, is so beautiful, having been there, I can tell you. It's one of the most gorgeous spots you'll ever see, including this beautiful one out the window. But it is also one of the most dangerous because it is not built for American helicopters or American Humvees. And so a lot of U.S. troops were killed there just doing their job, not even encountering an enemy. In fact, Combat Outpost Keating was named after First Lieutenant Ben Keating, who died when he was trying to drive a truck down the road, a road that had barely any support, even though the U.S. had been working on trying to fortify it for months, and it rolled over. And then Combat Outpost Kamdesh was Combat Outpost Keating. After Ross reached out to me and convinced me that the book should not just be about 2009, but should also be about 2006, and I should also explain who Ben Keating was. The outpost was named after him. Then another lieutenant reached out to me, First Lieutenant Dave Roller, who had served in the group that got there in 2007. Dave Roller, who wanted me to know about his commander, Captain Tom Bostic, who was killed fighting in Afghanistan, fighting and serving in that region. And he wanted me to know the names of Chris Pfeiffer and Ryan Fritchie, and other names I'd never heard before. He wanted me to know about the successes they had that year. It wasn't all bad. They were able to do what the Army strategy was at that point in the war, counterinsurgency, which is to empower locals, build water supplies for them, build roads, build infrastructure so that they are more inclined to not accept the Taliban in their midst. I should note that at not one point was anybody in this part of Afghanistan fighting anyone remotely related to Al-Qaeda. Then I heard from some of the individuals who served there in 2008. They wanted me to tell the story of their captain, Rob Yeskes, another commander at Combat Outpost Keating who had been killed. He had been targeted for assassination by the local insurgency. Pretty soon I had a much bigger book on my hands than I had intended on writing. And it became a much bigger cause than writing a story about one battle. Even though that was, at the time I started it, something of a calling, telling the stories of these troops became something that really opened my eyes to a reality that I knew, but one I hadn't really ever contemplated, which is what it's like being in the 99%. The 99% that doesn't have any skin in the game. The 99% that doesn't pay any additional taxes, it doesn't serve, it doesn't sacrifice, it doesn't do anything except change the channel when war coverage comes on that makes me uncomfortable. My grandfather served in World War II, and he lost his little brother over France. He was a tail gunner, my Uncle Edwin. But other than that, I, like most Americans, am not a veteran, and until recently, didn't have very many veterans in my life. I interviewed more than 225 people for the book. And I'd like to say that most of the people I reached out to were cooperative. Most of the people I reached out to wanted to tell their stories. In fact, I had to cut some of the stories from the book because nobody was going to buy a 6,000-page book about Afghanistan. After the book came out in November last year, it just came out on paperback a couple weeks ago, and John wanted me to speak here last year, I should point out. He's no fair weather fan. He was there when he heard about the book. There were two things that were really meaningful to me. One is that a group of men and women, and there were women who served at Combat Outpost Keating, but also the women who were married and who were the moms and sisters and daughters of the men who served at Combat Outpost Keating, because the families of those who serve are just as much a part of this, if not more so, became part of the book. There were more of them, more veterans and their family members at our book launch party than there were anybody else. I didn't really invite that many of the Washington folk. There were a lot of them there, but more important to me were the troops who came from all over, Ross and Dave and all the moms that I could get there. President Obama, in the last few months, for the first time since 1968, has awarded 2 living service members the Medal of Honor for valorous deeds. The first time 2 of them for the same battle have been honored since 1968. They are former Staff Sergeant Clint Romachet, who was a leader fighting back the enemy that day at Combat Outpost Keating, and current Sergeant Ty Carter. That was very meaningful to me. I don't think I had anything to do with it, but it was very meaningful to be part of a recognition process for these men and women. A recognition of what they fought for, and many of them died for. And many of them, as I don't need to tell veterans in this room or their loved ones, still fight in their minds every day because of the hard things that they saw and did. The government shutdown was an incredibly annoying thing to cover a few weeks ago. But one of the moments that sticks with me is when we went down, me and my camera crew, to the World War II memorial during that whole thing. And I got to meet some World War II veterans. And for some of them, and you know what this is like, veterans and loved ones of veterans, for some of them, it was still right there. The men that they lost that day, or in that war, they still felt the pain, they still bore the wounds, they still wept when thinking about it. So it was nice to be a small part of the recognition of these men and women who served at Combat Outpost Keating. There was one other part, though, that was an awakening for me that was not as pleasant, but was as much a part of being a veteran as anything is. It's just not talked about as much. I want to read to you just a little bit from the book. I want to tell you about a guy named Private Ed Faulkner, Jr. Ed Faulkner was a country boy from Burlington, North Carolina, and he served in Iraq. He got a Purple Heart there, like a lot of troops. He developed a dependency on the painkiller he was on. He had a drug problem, I think it's fair to say. One of his best friends OD'd, another soldier, before they deployed in 2009 to Afghanistan. But Ed went to Afghanistan and he fought that day, and he performed valorously. There were these 5 guys stuck in a Humvee, and Ed Faulkner Jr. was one of 3 guys who got in another truck and tried to save them. Ed Faulkner Jr. was the only one of those 3 who made it back. And of the 5 guys in the Humvee, only 2 of them survived. Ed Faulkner Jr. came back with a really bad wound. He complained it was in the same spot as his previous wound, so nobody was going to believe him that he got wounded again. He had 2 Purple Hearts, he said, but just 1 scar. His drug problem picked up again once he was back in the States. The Army ultimately decided that they were going to discharge him. That would be a favor to Ed, because if he stayed in the Army much longer, they would be dishonorably discharging him. And much to the chagrin of his family, Ed Faulkner Sr. drove up to Colorado and then drove back with his son to North Carolina. Now I'm going to read a little bit with your permission. As soon as Faulkner got back to Burlington, North Carolina, he retreated into his own head, keeping in touch with friends mainly through his Facebook page. Faulkner was haunted. He dreamt about Iraqis coming to his family's door, ringing the doorbell, and bringing him their dead babies. He lamented to his father that he could have done something to save Chris Griffin's life as they ran from the truck. When the sun was in the sky, he would have flashbacks. When the moon was out, he was constantly being scared awake by nightmares. Michael Scusa had once comforted Faulkner by saying, "It's all good, man, it's all good." But Scusa was dead, and he wasn't able to say that anymore. Later in April, Faulkner started in a carpet cleaning job for which he had to get up at 6 a.m. every day. His boss was showing him how to use the cleaning system on his van when Faulkner stepped into a bucket of scalding hot water. The blistering that resulted hurt worse than his bullet wound, he said. The outpost never left him. Faulkner would stay up late at night watching insurgents' videos on YouTube. He told a friend from 361 Cav, Brian Casey, that he heard gunfire and saw Taliban on a daily basis. His father took him to a Greensboro Grasshoppers minor league baseball game. As they left the game, the stadium's management started shooting off fireworks. Faulkner hit the ground as if he were under attack. Once in the middle of the night, Faulkner's mother, Sharon, couldn't find her son. He wasn't in his bed, but his truck was still in the driveway. He didn't answer his cell phone. She got in her car and drove around the neighborhood looking for him. He wasn't anywhere. When she returned, as she pulled into the driveway, she saw a shadow in the bushes in front of the house. She walked over and found her son crouched down, acting as if he had a rifle and were looking through its scope at an enemy across the street. He picked up an invisible radio and started talking into it, as if in combat. Faulkner met a woman named Charlene in August. She told him she was bipolar and suffered from manic depression. For the first time in a long while, Faulkner didn't feel alone. Charlene knew how he felt. She had a young daughter whom he helped with her homework, a normal life, or almost. He moved into Charlene's 2-bedroom apartment within weeks of meeting her. Charlene was on government assistance and lived in subsidized housing provided through the Burlington Housing Authority. Prescribed assorted medications, including methadone and Xanax. She'd been investigated a few times by the local police for selling her narcotics. To his family, all of this seemed cause for alarm, but Faulkner was unyielding. I don't have to live in the biggest house, he said to his sister. I don't need life's finest. So what if she's on welfare? So what if she's in government housing? Those people are the closest to God. On the night of September 15th, 2010, Charlene found Faulkner drifting off to sleep in his parked truck. When she asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer. She helped him stumble out of the vehicle and into her bed. The next morning, Charlene woke up and got her daughter ready for school. She took her to the bus stop. When she came back, she was surprised to see that Faulkner hadn't moved an inch. She realized he wasn't breathing. She called 911 and tried to revive him. The fire department arrived and took over the CPR. The police and an ambulance got there. The emergency medical technicians ran in and confirmed what the firefights had already ascertained: Faulkner was dead. They put him on a stretcher and wheeled him out, placed him in the back of an ambulance, and sped off to the emergency room. An autopsy indicated that his cause of death was acute methadone toxicity. A few days later, a Veterans Administration office worker called Ed Faulkner Sr. "Would you please let your son know that he's late for his appointment?" he asked. Ty Carter, who later would get a Medal of Honor, said, "I think Ed Faulkner was the 9th victim of Keating, and I honestly don't think he'll be the last." A conservative estimate of how many individuals who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, 2.5 million, have some sort of psychological wounds, whether post-traumatic stress or something else. A conservative estimate would have 500,000. Troops I know think there are many more. What are we doing as a society for these 500,000? Are we hiring them? Are we asking them how they're doing? Or are we looking away? Ronald Reagan wrote in his diary on November 4th, 1983, after the October 23rd bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon. He visited Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and Reagan wrote, "It was a dreary day with constant rain, which somehow seemed appropriate. It was a moving service and as hard as anything we've ever done. At the end, taps got to both of us. The only indoor part was a receiving line meeting the families of the deceased. They were so wonderful. Sometimes widows or mothers would just put their arms around me, their head on my chest, and quietly cry. One little boy, 8 or 9, politely handed me a manila folder, saying it was something he had written about his father. Later, when I could read it, I found it was a poem entitled Loneliness." The conclusion I reach from my book is that we have some of the best people I've ever met serving in this country, serving for us. I don't know that their command structure or the civilian leadership or, frankly, the American people necessarily always treat them with the respect they deserve. Thanks.
Jake, thank you so much for coming all the way across the United States to make your visit here today and give such a tremendous set of remarks. Just terrific. Thank you. Well, it's now time in our program to recognize all of you here today, representing the different branches of the military. The Santa Susana High School Symphony Orchestra and Ensemble will be performing a service medley. So when you hear your branch's song, please stand so we can salute you. In addition, if you are a family member here representing a member of the military, please stand in their place when their branch's song is played so we can remember everyone who has participated or sacrificed in protecting our country's freedom.
Yeah. I don't know that harder, but as hard. They don't know what's going on, and they have no control.
fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle done, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence, loud and strong. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Oh, wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
Marines,
From the halls of mountains Uruk to the shores of the Golden, we will fight the country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First we fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor free. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines.
Coast Guard,
We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in Thee.
Oh, there we go. One. It's Coast Guard, I think. I don't know this one either.
This is our God, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready to or die. Like Coast Guard, we fight for you.
Navy,
until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home.
Air Force,
Margie was an Air Force brat.
Now we rise, batting our flames from under, off with war's terrible roar. We live in fame, we'll go down in flame, for nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. America,
Well, thank you all for being with us today. We will conclude today's program with the playing of God Bless America, and upon conclusion of the song God Bless America, Jake has very kindly agreed to stay up on stage and sign copies of The Outpost, the book he read from, for those of you who are interested. And you can get copies of it if you haven't gotten one already right outside these glass doors here. I really invite you to do it, as it is a world-class book. Just please don't get in line to have it signed until we finish with the song. In addition, all veterans and active members of the military will receive free admission to view the library exhibits in the Air Force One Pavilion today. So with that, thank you all very much. God bless you, and have a great Veterans Day.